The kitchen smelled like coffee I hadn't touched yet. I sat at the table by the window, the one with the little crack in the corner that my husband said he'd fix 30 years ago and never did. I never fixed it either. I kept it. Some things you hold on to not because they're perfect, but because they're yours. My reading glasses were sitting on top of a folder. Inside that folder were printouts, confirmation numbers, deposit receipts, a rental agreement for a 4-bedroom house on Tybee Island, Georgia ocean view, wraparound porch, a fire pit big enough to sit 8 people around comfortably. I had printed everything because I am 67 years old, and I still don't fully trust things that only exist on a screen. I had been planning this trip for 14 months. 14 months. I want you to understand what that means. It means I started planning it before my daughter-in-law's birthday last year, before Christmas, before the spring when my son called to tell me they were expecting their 3rd child, and I cried in my car for 20 minutes, not from sadness, but from the specific kind of joy that reaches all the way down into your bones. I had already started a spreadsheet by then, a color-coded spreadsheet. My neighbor Patricia saw it once and said, "Gloria, you need a hobby." I told her this was my hobby. I am a retired schoolteacher. I taught 3rd grade for 31 years in Savannah, Georgia. I know how to plan. I know how to think ahead, how to prepare for things that haven't happened yet, how to build something carefully so that when the moment comes, everything is ready. That is what I did for this trip. I had been saving for it, the way my mother taught me quietly, consistently, without telling anyone. A certain amount every month, set aside in an account I barely looked at, because looking at it made me want to spend it. When my husband passed 4 years ago, I made myself a promise. I promised him, actually. I stood at his grave on a Tuesday morning in November and I said, "Thomas, I'm going to take the family to the beach. A real trip. All of us together." He had always wanted that. Every summer he would say, "We should rent a house on the coast." And every summer something came up. Money was tight. The kids had camps. Work wouldn't allow it. Time kept folding in on itself the way it does when you're living inside a life and not watching it from the outside. So I did it for him. And for me. And for the family we built together. By the time I booked the house, I had saved enough to cover everything. The rental, the flights, the groceries for the week. I even set aside a budget for activities kayaking, a dolphin tour I found online that the grandchildren would lose their minds over, my son and his wife, their 3 kids, my daughter and her husband, who I love like a son even though he talks too much during movies, their 2 kids, me, 11 people, 1 week, Tybee Island in June. I put everyone's names on the reservation. I called the airline and booked 9 seats. The grandchildren under 2 flew free and I paid for everything in full. Not a deposit, not a payment plan, everything. Because I wanted it to be real. I wanted there to be no way for it to fall apart. I told my son first. He said, "Mom, are you serious?" And I could hear him smiling through the phone. He said, "The kids are going to go crazy." He said, "This is incredible." He put me on speaker, and I heard my grandchildren in the background, and my son said, "Grandma's taking us to the beach." And the screaming that came through that phone, the pure, unfiltered joy of children, I pressed the phone against my chest and just breathed for a moment. That was 8 months ago. I stayed in touch with both my son and my daughter separately, sending them updates, little details. I found a bakery near the rental that made biscuits my husband would have proposed to on the spot. I found a seafood place with outdoor seating. I bought new sandals. I bought a sun hat I was slightly embarrassed by and wore it around my living room anyway to break it in. My daughter called me once a week. She asked about the house, about the sleeping arrangements, about whether there would be enough bathroom time in the mornings with 5 children under 10. We laughed about it. We made a schedule. She said, "Mama, I cannot wait." My son called less as the months went on. That was not unusual. He is a busy man. He works long hours. His wife manages their household with the kind of intensity that I have always quietly admired, even when it unsettled me. She is organized. She is particular. She has opinions about things I never thought to have opinions about. I respected that about her. I kept my distance when she seemed to want distance, and I showed up when they needed me. I thought we had an understanding. I was wrong about that. 53 days before the trip, my phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. I was washing a dish. I dried my hands on the dish towel, the yellow one, with the little embroidered lemons, and I picked up the phone. It was a text from my son. I want to be precise about this because the words mattered. They still matter. I have not deleted the message. I have read it more times than I can count. Not because I want to, but because some part of me keeps looking for a different meaning in it, some way of reading it that makes it less than what it was. He wrote, "Mom, I need to talk to you about the trip. Diane feels like it would be better if it was just us and her family this time. She's been feeling overwhelmed and she thinks a smaller group would be less stressful. I know you planned everything, and I really appreciate it, but I think it's best if you sit this one out. We can do something with you another time. Not trying to make this a big deal, it's just what works for us right now." I read it once. I put the phone face down on the counter. I picked up my dish and finished washing it. I dried it. I put it in the cabinet. Then I sat down at the kitchen table and I read it again. Sit this one out. I was 67 years old. I had taught other people's children for 31 years. I had raised 2 of my own. I had buried my husband. I had held this family together through job losses and miscarriages, and a year when my son struggled in ways he still doesn't talk about openly. And I sat on the other end of the phone at 2 in the morning more times than I can. Remember, just so he knew someone was there. And my son, had sent me a text message to tell me I was not welcome on the trip I had planned and paid for. Not a phone call. A text. I sat there for a long time. The refrigerator hummed. A car passed outside. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked twice and stopped. I thought about calling him. I picked up the phone 3 times and put it down. I knew that if I called him in that moment, I would either cry or say something I couldn't take back, and I did not want to do either. I have always believed that the most important conversations deserve the clearest head, so I waited. I called my daughter instead. She answered on the second ring, the way she always does, and I could tell immediately from the sound of my own voice that she knew something was wrong. I read her the text. There was a silence on her end that told me she had not known. And then she said, very quietly, "Mama, just that." My name in her mouth the way she said it since she was 4 years old. She said she was sorry. She said she would talk to her brother. I told her not to. I told her this was not her problem to fix, and I meant it. After we hung up, I sat with it for 3 days. I went about my life. I watered my plants. I went to my book club. I smiled at the appropriate times and answered questions when people asked them. But underneath all of it, in the quiet, I was thinking. I thought about the reservation, the house on Tybee Island with the wraparound porch and the fire pit, the ocean view I had imagined my grandchildren pressing their small faces toward for the first time, the airline tickets I had purchased in full, the dolphin tour, the biscuit bakery. I thought about the moment, 8 months ago, when my son heard his children screaming with joy and I held the phone against my chest. I thought about Thomas and the promise I made at his grave. And then I got quiet in a different way. not the hurt kind of quiet, the decided kind. On the fourth day, I opened my laptop. I pulled up the travel booking account. It was in my name. Everything was in my name. Because I had booked everything, because I had paid for everything. The flights, the rental, all of it tied to my email address and my credit card and my name. I looked at the screen for a moment, and then I began. I called the rental company first. I explained that I needed to modify the reservation. The woman on the phone was very pleasant. She walked me through the options. There was a full refund available because I had purchased the protection plan 14 months ago. I had purchased the protection plan because I am the kind of person who thinks ahead. The money came back to my account within 72 hours. Then I went into the airline portal. My name, my account, my booking reference. The system asked me to confirm before making changes. It said, "Are you sure you want to cancel the following reservations?" And it listed all 9 seats, all 9 names, my son, my daughter-in-law, their 3 children, a family trip I had built from savings and hope, and a promise made at a grave. I confirmed. I sat back in my chair. Outside, it was a perfectly ordinary Thursday in Georgia. Someone was mowing their lawn. The azaleas along my fence were in full bloom, the pink ones Thomas planted the year our youngest was born. I had not cried yet. I noticed that about myself. I thought I would, but I didn't. What I felt instead was something harder to name, a kind of stillness, like a door closing firmly, but without slamming. My son called that evening. I let it ring. He called again an hour later. I answered. His voice was different this time. The casual tone from the text was gone. He asked if I had canceled everything. I told him I had. He was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "Mom, why would you do that?" And there it was, that particular kind of confusion that people have when they expected no consequences, and consequences arrived anyway. I said, "You told me I wasn't welcome. I took you at your word." He said it wasn't like that. He said Diane was just stressed. He said he thought I would understand. I asked him what exactly he thought I would understand. He didn't have a clear answer to that. He said they had been looking forward to the trip. I said I had been looking forward to it too, for 14 months, and I had paid for it in full, and I had been told via text message to sit it out, and I had made my peace with that. He said, "What about the kids? They were excited." I said, "I know. I was excited too." He said that wasn't fair. I didn't respond to that. There are some things that don't need a response. He asked if I could at least refund him the money he had expected to use for incidentals. I want you to sit with that for a moment. The trip was canceled because his wife did not want me there. I had paid for the entire trip, and my son called to ask me for money. I said, "I love you. I'll talk to you soon." And I ended the call. My daughter-in-law never reached out. Not a text, not a call, not a single word. I noted that. I filed it carefully in the place in my mind where I keep things I need to remember about people. What I did next, I had been quietly planning since the third day, the decided kind of quiet. I called my friend Rosetta. We have been friends for 42 years. She is the kind of woman who laughs first and asks questions later, and she is the best person to have next to you in any situation that requires either a good time or a good fight. I told her what had happened. She said 3 words that I will not repeat here, but that were deeply satisfying to hear. Then I told her I stupid. And stupid with nowhere to be and money back in my account, and I asked her if she wanted to go to Tybee Island. She screamed. I called my college roommate, Verna, who is 71, and retired and has been saying for years that we need a real trip. I called Patricia, my neighbor, the one who teased me about my spreadsheet. I called my cousin Loretta from Augusta, who I hadn't seen in 2 years because life keeps getting in the way it does. Within 48 hours, I had 4 women and 1 week in June, and a 4-bedroom house with an ocean view that I had already paid for with the refunded money because I knew exactly what I wanted to do with it the moment it hit my account. I booked it immediately. Same house. Same week. Different names on the reservation. Mine, Rosetta's, Verna's, Patricia's, Loretta's. The morning we arrived on Tybee Island, I stood on that wraparound porch in my slightly embarrassing sun hat and I looked out at the water. The Atlantic stretched out in every direction, gray-green and enormous and completely indifferent to my problems. The air smelled like salt and something sweeter underneath it. Behind me, I could hear Rosetta arguing with the coffee maker and Patricia laughing at her and Verna saying very calmly that she had packed a French press because she does not trust vacation rentals. I thought about Thomas. I thought about the promise I made at his grave. I'm going to take the family to the beach. I thought about how grief reshapes things without asking your permission, how the family you imagine standing on a porch like this can become something different from what you planned, and how that difference does not have to be lesser. It can just be different. It can still be good. It was good. It was so good. We stayed up late every night, the 5 of us around the fire pit with our feet in the sand and drinks in our hands, talking the way women talk when there are no children to tend to and no one needs anything from them, and the night is wide open. We talked about our husbands, the ones we'd lost, and the ones we still had. We talked about our children, the complicated love of them, the way they grow into people you didn't fully predict, and you have to decide every day to keep loving them through the distance. We talked about who we were at 30 and who we were now and what we still wanted, and I was surprised to find that I still wanted things. A lot of things. The wanting hadn't gone anywhere. On the 3rd day, we did the dolphin tour. I had forgotten to cancel it when I originally called off the trip. Or maybe some part of me had not forgotten, and I had simply moved the booking to the new names. We were the oldest people on the boat by at least 20 years, and we did not care at all. When the dolphins came, 3 of them curving up out of the water close enough that the spray reached us, Rosetta grabbed my arm and held on, and I heard the sound she made, that raw, immediate sound of surprise and wonder, and I thought, yes, this is the thing. This is the reason you plan and save and hold on. I cried that day. Finally, standing on the back of a boat with the sun on my face and my oldest friend's hand on my arm and dolphins in the water below me, I cried quietly, and I let it happen. And I did not explain it to anyone, and no one asked me to. My son texted me on Thursday of that week. He said he hoped I was doing well. He said the kids kept asking about Grandma's beach trip. I read the message, and I put my phone back in my beach bag, and I went back to my book. I answered him when I got home. I told him I had a beautiful week. I told him the island was everything I had imagined. I told him I loved him because I do, because loving someone and holding them accountable are not opposites. They never were. I have not yet had the full conversation with my son that this situation deserves. That conversation is coming. I am not afraid of it. I raised him to understand that actions have weight, that the people who love you most are not the ones to take for granted, that your mother is a person, a full, complete, continuing person, and not a resource you draw from when it's convenient. He will hear that. Not in a letter, not in a text. Face to face. The way things that matter should be said. What I know now, standing on the other side of that week, is this. I spent a very long time arranging my joy around other people's comfort, planning it to include them, shaping it to fit around their schedules and preferences and moods. And there is a generosity in that, a real one, and I don't regret it. But generosity that is only met with expectation stops being generosity. It becomes something else. It becomes a system that someone built without your permission, where you are always the one giving, and they are always the one receiving. And nobody ever says thank you, they just say more. I stepped out of that system. I did it quietly, the way I do most things, without a speech or a scene, just a series of deliberate choices made one at a time. I refunded the flights. I called my friends. I stood on a porch in the morning light with coffee in my hand and salt air in my lungs, and I thought about Thomas, and I thought, I kept my promise. We made it to the coast. It just looked different than I planned. That is all right. Some of the best things do.